childhood, and I think that it is very important that we continue, while we are talking about the peace, addressing the real issues also on humanitarian side. Also, one thing that I want to particularly mention is I'm coming from the country, Latvia, that has history of the Soviet occupation and colonialism. What we see in Ukraine today is what many of countries here present have seen also in the past. Russia is the country that is launching colonial war, and I think that it is also very important that we look at this war from this aspect. Finally, I do believe that we need to work further, and this summit is the first step when now we have the world's communities' support to work out the comprehensive roadmap and to continue in the very good spirit that we have seen all here also in the future. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you so much. And finally, it's my pleasure to hand over the floor to the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
President Humbert, President Zelensky, thank you for asking Canada to close these interventions from the floor. And thank you for bringing us all together for this important and successful summit. It is a summit on peace in Ukraine, but it is not just about Ukraine. It is about whether or not the global community will stand up for international law and the rules-based order that protects us all. Canada will always be a strong voice for democracy, freedom, and peace, and standing up for international law and the rules-based order. This is why we keep supporting Ukraine. Our work all together during this summit has helped shape a joint vision of a peace framework based on the UN Charter and international law. We will continue to uphold the fundamental principles embedded in the UN Charter. Before coming to Switzerland, I was in Italy for the G7, where we took significant actions to keep supporting Ukraine, primarily with the major G7 loans to help pay for the damage caused by Russia. When a just and sustainable peace comes, we will all be there to help Ukraine rebuild. What's good about buildings is that they can be rebuilt. But the people who lost their lives, the families destroyed, they won't be able to bring them back. That's the most painful consequence of war, the human suffering. As Volodymyr pointed out last night, today in many, many countries around the world, it's Father's Day. This evening, many of us will be home with our kids. Not everyone is so lucky. Ukraine, thousands of kids have been taken from their families, their home, their communities. Ukraine says that close to 20,000 children were taken by Russia. We've recently seen reports of Ukrainian children being listed on Russian adoption websites. They're being forced to forget their identity as Ukrainians. I think we all know the consequence of removing children from their language, their culture, their families, their identity. It's a form of colonialism that the world cannot abide by. Earlier today, I co-chaired a working session on the human dimension of this war to work towards bringing kids home to their families. And Canada's announcing $15 million in funding to support the reintegration of displaced children returning to Ukraine through improved child protection services and family-based care options. Ukrainian kids belong in their schools, their playgrounds, and their communities. This funding will also improve access to justice for survivors of war crimes, among other measures. This illegal war by Russia needs to end. Humanitarian law and the UN Charter must be respected. We have to keep sending strong signals that our solidarity with Ukraine is as strong as ever and will not fade. Russian aggression has to stop. It won't be easy, but as a dad, I hope that we can all get to a just and sustainable peace in the next year so that Ukrainian kids and families can celebrate Father's Day together, but also that people and families everywhere around the world are able to know that international law and the rules-based order will be defended and upheld by all countries in the world. This is how we protect each other. This is how we protect future generations. This is how we keep the world on the right track. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava, glory to Ukraine, glory to its heroes.
The entire route, as well as against civilian ports and civilian port infrastructures, are unacceptable. Thirdly, all prisoners of war must be released by complete exchange. All deported and unlawfully displaced Ukrainian children and all other Ukrainian civilians who were unlawfully detained must be returned to Ukraine. One key question remains: how and when can Russia be included in the process? We have heard it in many of your statements. A lasting solution must involve both parties. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the discussions over the past 2 days have shown that there are different points of view. All the more important is our understanding that the path towards peace in Ukraine must be pursued on the basis of international law and, in particular, the United Nations Charter. Further steps are needed to achieve that goal. Switzerland is ready to continue to play an active role in this process of dialogue. I am confident that we will all commit ourselves to this process beyond the Bürgenstock and in the knowledge that the road ahead is long and challenging. Switzerland will continue to be a committed partner. The international community is familiar with the tradition of my country and its good offices. The world can be sure that we will continue to work for peace in Ukraine, just as we have done this weekend. I would like to thank you most sincerely for everything that you and your states have achieved. And I would also like to thank everyone who has worked on preparing and making this conference possible. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes concludes the summit. In the name of the Swiss Federal Council, it is now my pleasure to invite you all to proceed to the informal standing lunch that concludes the summit on peace in Ukraine. Thank you very much.